All right then, let's get started. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're going to be talking today about moving your data anywhere within minutes and show you just how simple workload mobility can be with Zerto. My name is Gene Torres, and I am a technology evangelist for Zerto. I've been with Zerto now for about a little over 3 years, about 3.5 years maybe. And I've been working as an IT professional for about 21 years now. I've held various positions throughout my career. You can see on that timeline. I started out as a laptop technician, worked my way up to enterprise architect, and here I am today. So I believe that challenges enable learning, right? And learning creates knowledge, and knowledge is to be shared with all. So naturally, when I went looking for some clever quote to share with you all, it didn't take me long to find this one here that sums it up for me. And it really resonated with me. If you have knowledge, let others light their candles in it. And I think that's very valuable because without knowledge, we can't teach, and without teachers, we can't learn. So with that, my contact info is down there at the bottom left, email, Twitter, and my blog as well. Take a look if you get a chance. And let's jump right into it. All right, so for today's agenda, we're going to go through the Zerto platform for anyone who is not familiar with Zerto, and then we'll focus on our case study, or our use case focus, which is workload mobility or migration. Follow that up by a demo, and then after the demo, we'll jump back in and kind of then pull back in some of the customer proof points and success stories that we've heard from our customers in the field. And I can share some of my stories as well because I was a former customer at one point. Then we'll share a few events and resources. We've got some events coming up and some additional resources for you to leverage to learn more about Zerto, get your hands on it. And then also Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, I've got two of my colleagues, Rodney Hayden and Joshua Topnick, are joining me today. Ask your questions in the chat. They'll do their best to answer them in the chat as we go along. And then if they have any that they feel they want to broadcast out to everybody toward the end in the Q&A, they'll start asking questions. All right. So the Zerto platform is a cloud data management and protection platform. And it all starts with the foundation of continuous data protection. And with continuous data protection, what that means is you get always on replication. So you set replication up for your workloads and it stays on. You don't need to schedule it to be replicated. It's just continuously asynchronously being replicated. We've also got application consistency groupings. So we'll talk a little bit about that further down in the presentation and explain what that means and how we leverage it. And we are journal-based recovery. So we're not snapshot-based. We don't do point in time snapshots of your data to replicate it. This is just always on. It's at the hypervisor, and we also support long-term retention needs, so your backup use cases. So a platform wouldn't be a platform if it didn't include everything that you needed. So we've also included orchestration and automation, which brings workflows that are related to your backup and disaster recovery. Workload mobility and migration, which we're going to be talking about today. We also give you the opportunity to do a lot non-disruptive testing, and we believe that your data is only as good as the last time it was tested. So test often and test frequently enough so that you know that when you do need to recover or move your data, it's going to work. And finally, for those who want to step out beyond the graphical user interface world and automate things with code, we've got a RESTful API that you can build your scripts against, and anything that you basically see us do in Zerto today that you click on, point and click on, you can automate with scripts. And finally, we want to give you that visibility, so we've built in analytics and control, which comes as a software as a service from Zerto. It leverages your call home data for monitoring, reporting, and planning. So if you need visibility into building out a data center to move to, or your cloud expectations, storage, network requirements, things like that. We also have a planning tool that will take the workloads that you throw at it and tell you just how much resources you're going to need to be able to support that. All right, so what are the main use cases that Zerto customers are using today? So first and foremost, Zerto's bread and butter, we were born in the world of disaster recovery for virtual environments. Along with that, kind of a bonus was mobility and migration, because these same workflows, because you're moving data from one location to another, you may not need to, consider it a disaster recovery. This is going to be a planned event. So disaster recovery would be more for those unplanned events, like data gets deleted or corrupt, your data center goes down, it's underwater, any one of those things. That's going to be a disaster recovery. Mobility and migration is more of the planned migration. So and we'll look at a list of the most common cases for mobility and migration here in a second. Next, we've got backup. So traditionally, Zerto's been able to protect your data for up to 30 days, but in version 7, we introduced our backup product, which will then take your data beyond the 30 days and meet all those other use cases for data retention for the long term, especially for compliance needs and things like that. And finally, data reuse has become a popular use of Zerto as well, because we're protecting your data in two ways. One, we're protecting it for the short term in up to 30 days, very quick recovery because it does go to production grade storage. You can bring environments up to do testing, things like patch testing, security testing. You can clone out those workloads from a very near point in time to refresh test dev environments, things like that. So if you need to reuse your data somehow for analytics or anything, you can always spin that data up in a sandbox type of environment, non-disruptively, aside from production, and get that work done a lot quicker than you would with any other method. All right, so zoom in here for mobility and migration. So everything I talked about, we can put that aside for now, and we're just going to focus in on the migration use case because that's what we're here for today. All right, so in terms of the migration use cases, these are the most popular reasons why Zerto is used for migrations. And as you can see on the map here, we support many different platforms. They can be on-premises data centers, they could be managed service providers, various VMware as a service solutions that other public clouds provide, as well as native Azure and native AWS and IBM cloud, which happens to be a VMware cloud. Right, use cases here for migration would be for infrastructure refresh. If you are refreshing your virtual environment and you want to rebuild, for example, you want to rebuild on a fresh version of vSphere, say for years you've been constantly following the upgrade path and you kind of want a fresh, brand new environment to start with, you can build that out first, replicate your workloads to it, and migrate them over very non-disruptively, and also with zero data loss at that point. So migrations between 2 or more on-premises data centers, this one's very popular. A lot of it tends to happen with mergers and acquisitions. We're talking data center consolidations as well. And we've got some pretty cool success stories around that, which we'll talk about later. Public cloud migration. So if, I'm not sure where you are all on your cloud journey or strategy today, but you can use Zerto for the same way you use it between your 2 on-premises data centers to migrate your workloads out to any one of the clouds listed down there in the list there. Colo, MSP migration, that's the managed service provider migration. Managed service providers for us also offer DR as a service. So if that's something you're looking for, we partner with a lot of managed service providers to provide that service for you. And disaster avoidance. So this one's interesting, and we consider disaster avoidance not really preventing anything from happening, but moving your workloads out of harm's way. And we'll hear a couple of success stories at that point as well. So what are some popular migration strategies? We've got three main migration strategies today. The first one is going to be the Big Bang, right? So the Big Bang is going to be considered one of those where you move everything at once. There's no dress rehearsal. It takes a very long time to prepare for this type of migration. You cannot test it non-disruptively because you test it when you move it. So it's very risky, and everything. So you don't need two of everything per se to stage when you're taking this approach for migrations. There is a lot of downtime associated with it because you do have to shut down all those systems and then physically bring them up on the other side or move them. And if it fails, you have to start over. So not a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of safety that's available for this type of migration strategy. Next one is phased. So the phased process can be lengthy and complex, both in preparation and execution, because when we're going in a phased approach, you're moving either servers at a time, applications at a time, things like that. So it does take a lot of planning. You do need to find all those dependencies, make sure the infrastructure is ready to go on the other end before you start moving those workloads. So extended time frame and can be costly because it's a long, drawn-out process. Happens over a long period of time, which involves a lot of people. There is less risk than the Big Bang because now you're approaching your migrations in a phase, little pieces. So you can move one application at a time and not worry about the rest of them. Whereas if you moved everything at once and there's problems with everything, your teams are stretched thin. They're up all night, all day, and all day and all night, and they're working to get things up. You do need to look at your dependencies for this type of approach as well. Make sure that when you move an application, you've got all of its dependencies along with it. Otherwise, you can cause a prolonged outage or disruption. All right, so parallel. So the parallel I've seen actually happen quite a bit. In my years in the data center, and this is where you pre-build systems for every single application server in your target data center. And as part of that, what ends up happening is you find a way to start replicating data or copying data and keeping it in sync, and then constantly trying to keep it in sync. So there's a lot of monitoring involved with it. This can be very costly, again, because it does take a lot of time. It does require a lot of resources to be pre-built and then pre-built to spec to match exactly. So getting it dialed in can take some time. And then also making sure that everything is working takes a lot of time as well and can cost you a lot more. You're effectively also managing two environments. So if you staffed for one data center, now that team those teams are doing double duty. They're managing both of those environments. You're monitoring to make sure all those systems in the target data center as well are up and ready to take those workloads over. So if it fails, then you actually can switch back to the legacy, because once you do that cutover, the data is still in the original site. However, there are concerns about data loss at that point, because you've been running or down for a certain period of time, and your business has been running on these new systems, and you find something's wrong, you need to switch back. There's no way to move the data back unless you reverse the process manually. A lot of it's very manual. So now we looked at the strategies. Let's take a look at the solutions involved with these types of moves. So first one, I'm sure many of you who have been in IT are familiar with the lift and shift. And this is a legacy physical move, which works very well for things where applications or systems where there's no time sensitivity and they're not business critical. This is where you would pick a moving date and time, shut the systems down, pack them up, load them in a truck, get shipped somewhere, or you drive it to the other data center across town, rack, stack, cable, turn it on, hoping that everything works, because you do also need to make sure that your infrastructure, such as networking, firewalls, etc., are in place. This is a lengthy process, and it says no revert there. It is possible to revert, but that means packing it back up and moving it back. At that point, it's kind of a, you make a decision. Do we stick with what we've got? Do we fix it and make it work? Or do we just shut it all down and bring it back and wait for another time and try to figure out what we missed, what failed, and fix that first and try it again? So this is a very legacy. And in fact, there are still companies out there that offer this service for anyone who needs it. I was actually pretty surprised to see that. All right, next solution or method is going to be storage snapshots. So when you're using storage snapshots, you're basically relying on LUN-based replication, and typically that's going to require you to have matching storage or pre-built systems on the other end. So as we go through this, you're going to start seeing that there are pieces of each one of these that we eventually use today. But for storage snapshots, you do need the matching storage. So if you plan to change your storage platform in this new data center or in the cloud, for example, it's going to be very tough to do that. Maybe impossible. Just know that is going to be a challenge, is getting that data over there. Right. You do get the ability to test in this scenario in isolation, because if you do match your storage, you are replicating your LUNs, your snapshots, you can mount those in the target data center, attach them to systems, and with the network isolated, and be able to test those to see if they come up and how they perform, and if it's going to be successful. So you do get the visibility there. So that's one real good plus side to that. This process also can be lengthy, costly, and if RPO is a concern, you could have X amount of data loss. The most frequent snapshots I've actually seen or heard from customers is about 2 hours. Some can get as aggressive as an hour, but you do end up with a bit of data loss there. Right, third method here. And the last piece is there's no orchestration unless you're leveraging something that will orchestrate and plug into your storage infrastructure. Third method here is using your backups. So when you do your backups, it's like a lift and shift. You're basically creating a copy of your servers and getting the data to the destination in some form or fashion. You're either shipping physical tapes, driving it across town, or if you're sending your data to a purposely built backup appliance, you can replicate that data over there and then start your recovery process on the other end. But this can also be a lengthy process, and there are RPO considerations to keep in mind, because you can go as high as 24 hours of data loss when you're doing backups, because we typically back data up once a day. So things to consider there. This process is very manual. There's little to no orchestration involved with it, especially if you're backing one system up at a time, you're restoring one system at a time, and then your timestamps across all your systems are going to be from different points in time. So there could be change that took place before the next backup was taken, and then you copy that over. You find out that this system is no longer matching with the system that you restored earlier. So it's very manual, and the orchestration can be challenging. Reverting in this method would mean data loss. Excuse the asterisk there because I forgot to remove it. But basically what that means is if you've restored your backups in your destination and then you find out a day later, a week later that it's not working, you're now having to back the data up again and send it back in the other direction, so you're losing more data along the way. Now, when you're looking at something that like Zerto, which is what we're here for, continuous data protection is what we do, right? If you're doing asynchronous data protection or data replication, or even synchronous, there are requirements. So you do need that foundational infrastructure in place. You get the ability to plan and test. So do your dependency mappings, find out what systems make up an application, and then put them into a protection group, which we'll talk about on the next slide, I believe, and then replicate it and then test it in isolation. And you can do this as often as you need until you get it completely dialed in non-disruptively, and then you can go and schedule your change management or change requests to then make the move on a set date and time. So a lot of this is kind of like a baking show where you do all the planning up front, you mix your dough and everything, and then you stick it in the oven. And then when you're ready to test, you're pulling it out of the oven, you're tasting it, you're feeling it, you're smelling it, all that stuff before you consider it a success or a failure. With this solution, especially with how we move data, you're going to get zero data loss, and then your recovery time objectives are going to be in minutes. And to add to that, if you don't, if it doesn't succeed the first time, we do offer a commit period, and we recommend about 60 minutes. So you get 60 minutes, you can do more, you can make it manual, 60 minutes to validate when you bring that system up that the application's working, that everyone can get to it. You get your application teams on to validate everything, make sure everything works. If it doesn't, you just click rollback, we'll shut everything down and bring it all back up in the original data center with very little to no data loss at that point. If you do choose to commit, you can rapidly reprotect back into the other direction, which is recommended because just like we talked about with the backups, that if you needed to revert, backups would cause data loss. But if you reprotect with our rapid reprotect, the data, as soon as you commit it, is automatically replicating back in the other direction and ready for you at any moment. So, and if you did need to move back, it is again a zero data loss type of move that happens in minutes. And finally, with the Zerto solution, you're going to get disk and application consistency. So unlike what we mentioned with the manual part of the backups, where you would back up one system at a time, with Zerto, you're backing the entire application, or you're replicating the entire application as one. So that when you bring the systems up, they're going to be, their timestamps are going to be identical in point in time. So it doesn't matter if you have 2 systems, 10 systems, 50 systems, all the disks that make up all those workloads are going to be consistent to that exact point in time. So there's no massaging of data. There's none of that going on. You just know that this is that point in time that we'll reshut it down and we're bringing it back up. So it's like you just turn the light switch off on your primary data center and you're turning the light switch on the other side. All right, so since we're talking about disk and application consistency, and I mentioned those virtual protection groups, there's a virtual protection group. So a virtual protection group, and we'll see this in our demo because we have a demo coming up. The virtual protection group offers that multi-VM disk consistency. So it doesn't matter how many VMs you've got in there, how many disks are attached to them. But if you look at the graphic here and those timestamps, when you bring up an application on the other end, your file server, your database server, your web server, your app server, all those systems that make up that application are going to be consistent to that point in time with write order fidelity, which means the order the data was written to in production is the exact same order we write it to on the recovery side. So we're not missing anything. Boot ordering, part of that orchestration, we offer the boot ordering. So if you know that your database server needs to come up before your file server, or app server, web server, the boot ordering can be put in place so those systems can come up the way they're supposed to that you have in production. And then re-IPing also is a big topic here. Some enterprises today, they stretch their networks across the 2 data centers. So they may not need to re-IP. They can use the same IPs all over again, which cuts down some of that change that goes over. However, if you do need to re-IP your systems, re-IPing for each one of those physical or virtual NICs on your systems can take place automatically for you. Well, I'll show that to you in our demo as well. And then migration and rollback, when we do that, you're doing the whole application at a time, a single entity. So think back again to our backups. Those one systems, single systems at a time. When you're doing that at scale, it takes a long time, and there's a chance for failure. There's more chance for failure. With the entire application coming over as one, there's less chance it doesn't take as long, and you can easily roll it back if needed. And then if you pick that specific point in time, it doesn't work, you can also pick a different point in time, try that from seconds ago. All right, so I'm going to switch over to my demo screen here, and I'll disappear from the screen for a bit, and we'll jump right into it. So once again, if you guys have any questions during the demo, feel free to ask it in the chat. Josh and Rodney will be more than happy to answer those questions for you. All right, I take it everyone can see my screen. Okay, before we dive right in, I'm going to give you a little tour of what the lab or what my lab looks like. So I've got two vCenter environments. The one here that you see right now is going to be my Seattle data center. And then my second tab here, this is my Boston data center. Let me just move this out of the way. Whoops. Okay, let's just hide that. Okay, and then each one of these is going to have a Zerto environment as well. So what you'll see here is this is our Zerto virtual manager right there, that's ZVM prod. And then each one of our hosts are here. Each one of those hosts gets a virtual replication appliance, which are the data movers. And then I've got my application servers here. All right, same thing here. So we'll log into Zerto for the Seattle side. And you can see my site here. I'm connected to Boston. I've got a virtual protection group here called My Application. It has 3 servers in it. And then we've got our Boston data center here. And if you're watching this, you're going to see that the environment is, or the Zerto user interface is exactly the same. So you can actually perform these migrations from either location. Before we jump into moving my application, we'll create a virtual protection group on the Seattle side, replicated over to Boston. So again, this is like that baking show where I'm going to show you the mixing of the dough and everything, and then sticking it in the oven. And then when we do the migration with my application here, that's going to be pulling it out of the oven. So we'll get started here. I've got, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click this new VPG button. That's the virtual protection group that I'm going to create. And this needs to only have at least one system in it, but we can have multiples. So I'm just going to call this test. Give it a description here. Okay, I'm going to choose my test server. I'm going to add it to the selected VMs on the right here. I'm going to choose my recovery site, which is Boston. I'm going to select, I can select either a specific host I want to send it to, a cluster, or if you have resource pools, you can choose a resource pool to send this to. So I'll just choose my low priority resource pool. This is a test system. I'm going to choose my data store. Again, if you have data store clusters, those will show up here as well. Now, journal history. This is our journal that I was talking about. We can go as low as 1 hour or out to 30 days, but for this purpose, I do 1 hour. And typically, within an hour, I'm going to get about 1,500 snapshots, or not snapshots, but points in time in the journal that I can recover to, all seconds apart from each other. So it's very granular. If you do 30 days, if you take that 1,500 based on an hour and multiply that all out, you're going to get quite a bit of recovery points in time. Now, target RPO alert, this is going to set an alert. So if the business tells me, all right, the SLA for data loss on this application is 5 minutes, then Zerto is going to alert you if it ever breaches that 5 minutes. But typically what we see is 5 to 10 seconds of RPO. In some cases higher. And then test reminder, if this application needs to be tested routinely, you can get a reminder to test the application, which can be done non-disruptively. But I'm going to set none because it's relevant for us today. Zerto does WAN traffic compression in flight as well. And also today, we do support encryption in flight natively through Zerto. So if that's a question you had, we do support that, and it's in our site settings as opposed to being here. Okay, there's our server. This is all the disks that are attached to it. I've only got one disk here. This is just a dummy server that I built to kind of make things go fast, but we've got some working servers in my application. Default recovery settings. So we have two scenarios for this. One is going to be your failover/move, which is your live production network. So I'm going to choose my VM network. Failover test network is going to be my isolated sandbox network, which is failover test. These are just setting defaults, and we'll see on the next screen where you can go and you can choose different networks for each VM that's part of your work or your protection group. All right, so if I had multiple VMs in here, I can go into each one of them. If they had multiple NICs, if this test system had 2 NICs on it, you'll see test on 1 twice. You'll see 2 NICs or 2 lines here, 1 for each NIC. But I can edit this here, and then you can see my IP settings. I'll show this to you on my application because this one doesn't have an operating system on it. But you can create a new MAC address, set your network to DHCP or static or leave it alone, and then add your IP settings, and then you can have different networks for each one of these. Let's choose that. This is for our long-term retention or backup. I don't need to back the system up, so it's turned off. And now we've got a summary page. So that was it. We click done, and then we start replicating. And that's how simple it is to protect your systems. When I click done, Zerto's going to create the protection group, and it's going to start its initial sync, which means it needs to seed the data first. So it's going to copy the data in its entirety over to your destination site. One of the things that Zerto we can also do is pre-seed your data. So if you have a lot of data and a small bandwidth or a small WAN pipe, you can pre-seed the data in your destination data center, whether you're restoring a copy from backups or you're using your storage to replicate and restore snapshots. You can do that, and then Zerto can actually map to that data for your VMs to kind of get that initial sync taken care of a lot quicker. So here's my application. I'm going to edit this real quick to show you the network settings because we weren't able to see it on the previous one. So if we jump over to our NICs here, I've got my 3 systems. I got my database, my app, and my web server. And then if I just went in here to edit my web server, you can see here that I've got all my settings here for either scenario. In this one, I don't need to change the failover test because I want it to come up with the same IP address as production, which doesn't route back to my Seattle data center, therefore giving me that isolation capability to make sure the systems come up successfully. So we're going to cancel that. All right, so we saw how the dough was made, and right now it's in the oven, it's cooking, and actually it's already meeting its SLA. So we've got that 2 gigs over to the other data center pretty quickly, and we're getting a 5-second RPO. So there's 5 seconds of data loss at this point. If you want to see what our journal looks like, I'll just show you here. I won't run this test, but I'll show you the journal. I'll select the application and click on checkpoints here. And you can see here that I have 1,627 checkpoints, and they're all seconds apart from each other. Look at the timestamps. We can also tag checkpoints. So if you know you're making a change to your systems, like it's a patch event, right? You patch the system, before you patch it, add a tag checkpoint. So if you do have to revert, you can go back to that point in time right before. Much like you do with your snapshots today, but there is no snapshot involved in doing this process. So we're just tagging that checkpoint, that point in time, so if you do need to go back to it, you're gonna get it back in minutes. All right, with that, now we're gonna pull the data out of the oven. Before I do that though, you can see on my Boston site that there is no web server, there's no app server, there's no DB server. I'll show you just how simple this is. So let's jump over to the Boston data center in Zerto. And I'm going to go down to move here. And I'm going to select this first. So you can pre-select your application or just hit move and then select it. but I like to select it first so I know which one I'm targeting and don't forget, especially if you have a lot of these listed. So it's already selected here for my application. I do have a boot order, so my database server will come up first, and then my app server, and then my web server, and then we'll see that take place here. I'm gonna click next. I'm gonna force the shutdown, which is a nice feature because if VMware Tools is not responding to that graceful shutdown, Zerto will basically push the virtual power button on it and then proceed. Our commit policy is gonna give us 60 minutes to go and validate everything works before we commit it to Boston. Excuse me. And then, so that's going to give me the opportunity, if we go in and look at it, to roll back if it didn't work, and then bring the systems back up in Seattle. But we'll do that. I do have reverse protection enabled, so as soon as I commit, we're going to reverse protect automatically. That's that rapid reverse protect, and send the data back to Seattle in case I do need to bring it back for some reason. All right, we'll hit next here and start the move. So what we just saw, that those 4 clicks, is basically if you saw the registration for the webinar to see just how quickly migrate your data as fast as or as quickly as it takes to register for this webinar, that's that part. So now we've got we're pulling systems out of the oven. So here we go, we're starting that move. Expand this in just a few seconds here. You'll see under priority low, the VMs will start to pop up. So what's going on right now, let's look at Seattle, is we're shutting down the initial, we're doing the initial shutdown for the source systems, and then we're going to insert a clean checkpoint in that shutdown state. So it's going to be application consistent at that point and not crash consistent when they come up. So once those are all shut down, we'll go back to Boston. We can already see our servers have been registered in the vCenter inventory. And then we should see those start powering up shortly here. So there's no smoke and mirrors here. I'm not doing any of this. Zerto's taking care of all the orchestration here for you. It's putting the VMs exactly where we told it to put it, which is in that resource pool. It's turning the database server on first. I think I had a 15-second timeout on that before the app server came up. It's either 15 or 30, and then we'll see in the timestamps here. Yeah, so it's about 15 seconds because a start time for app server is about 15 seconds, a little more than that, 16 seconds after the database server was started, and then our web server comes up. Okay, now if we look at our database server, when it comes up, you'll see the IP address is going to be its original IP address, and that's normal. When it does that, it will re-IP, do one more reboot, and change the IP for us. And we'll see the update there as soon as that's done. And at this point, you can actually watch the system come up, as well as reboot. Oh yeah, it might have happened quickly enough. So we've already got our target IP address in this 222 VLAN. So that's the Boston data center. If I were to go to that IP address in my browser, oops, 51. Unless it's rebooting. Oh wait, no, nope, 1 second. I had the wrong IP. There we go. Database server 1's responding. Go to 152. Hello world. I believe this is our web server. And what was the other one? 153. There's our app server. So just a quick and dirty validation on my part to show that the application servers are up, that their IP addresses have in fact been changed and they are responding. Services are responding. What I'm going to do now at this point is I'm going to go into Zerto and I'm going to click this check mark at the end, which is to commit the workload. So I'm going to commit it. And reverse protection, as we saw, is already turned on. So I'm going to commit. And this is going to make it permanent. So when this is happening, we are committing all the previous checkpoints at that point in time to the VMDKs on those VMs in Boston. And we're going to go over to the Seattle side, and we're going to start unregistering these VMs from the inventory. There we go. Now they're gone. And as soon as that completes and the promotion process completes, we will then start sending everything back to Seattle. So if you did need to move it back, you can do that right away if you had to. And that's the demo. That's how quick and simple it is to migrate your data using Zerto. Yeah, in 4 clicks per. Actually, if I had more applications, I could select them all, and the same 4 clicks will get everything orchestrated. So yeah, all in that same amount of time. And then after we're done, let's see if this completes. It should be completed. I should get a report here with that move. No, that's not it. Okay, I need to wait for that to finish applying. Yeah, it should be there. Okay. Let's refresh that. Oh, this is it here. Okay. So what we also do here is we automatically create recovery reports for you. So we'll open this recovery report, and we can see all the details of this move, who performed the move, what type of operation it was. In this case, it was a move. The point in time chosen, start time, the finish time, the RTO, so the recovery time objective. It took 1 minute and 43 seconds to move that workload to Boston effectively. And then we can scroll further down, and we'll see all the details that were taken, all the steps that were taken in vCenter to get these systems up, whether each step succeeded or failed. And then we can print this out and send it off to the application team, stakeholders, and say, look, this was successful. Everyone signed off on it, and that will be it. So let's switch back to our main screen here. And all right. Yeah, so I hope that kind of sheds some light on how simple data migrations can be with Zerto platform. So here's some to kind of solidify, all that here. We've got some customer quotes that I wanted to share with you, and some of the differentiators that they themselves have called out as to why they chose Zerto, why, what made it what made it stand out from all the other solutions they were looking at. So first one we got here is XPO Logistics. They actually consolidated 21 data centers down into 6 in 36 months as they do grow by acquisition. So if you're thinking about like the cost savings in terms of dropping from 21 data centers that you're paying for and managing, hardware, software, people-wise, and as well as all the facilities, that's quite a bit to consolidate in 36 months. So very successful story there. Aaron's, in 90 days, they've migrated 100 applications. So this is going to be more of that phased approach, right? So they give themselves a timeline and number of applications, and then they space it out so they can do it on their terms when they want to do it, instead of halting the whole business and everybody and having this large concerted event go on that could cause more disruption. And in Spirit Airlines, so when we talked about disaster avoidance, Spirit Airlines, ahead of Hurricane Irma, they proactively migrated all their critical applications to another data center within 3 hours. And that 3 hours kind of shines with another story with a customer whose name I cannot mention, but they have stated that in an afternoon, in 3 hours, they not only migrated 742 systems to another data center, but they also ran a failover test first to make sure it would work before they did that. So all of that in 3 hours. So they got the visibility, and then they got the confidence, and then they moved it all within 3 hours successfully. Now, there's differentiators that many of our customers call out is, one is it's a single platform. So you're not bolting together different solutions from different vendors. matching storage array adapters, a separate piece of software for orchestration, things like that. It's a single platform. It's very simple to deploy, deploys in minutes. You can be protected within minutes. Simple, easy to deploy and use. It doesn't take an entire team to run Zerto. As you know, if I'm familiar with my days in the data center where we had an entire team running backups, multiple people. So it's very simple. It's built to be simple from day one, and one person can do all these take on all these operations with the project teams. Automation orchestration is built in. So if you are at scale and you are performing large moves, you can attempt to do it in the GUI, which is totally acceptable. But if you want to speed things up, you can script these automations to take place. It is continuous data protection. So once you turn it on, feel good, get some sleep at night, knowing that your data is constantly being replicated. You're not tied to a schedule or anything like that. Multi-hybrid cloud support. So Zerto also does one-to-many replication simultaneously. So if you had a strategy where you're moving specific applications to specific places in the world or clouds, you can divvy all that up and replicate them all at the same time. You can even send the same workload to 3 different sites simultaneously for DR purposes, where you have plan A, plan B, and plan C. It is innovative, was built to be innovative, was born in the era of virtualization. And we continue to innovate today, and we've got some exciting announcements coming up at ZertoCon, which I'm leading on to. But I won't take steal that thunder. But we do continue to innovate and improve and enhance as we go forward to now represent those cloud native applications and protect them. So if that wasn't enough, I know a lot of you may turn to Gartner for advice on solutions. Ron Blair is a research and advisory director over there, and his quote about Zerto is that no one can do it better. And with that, let's take a look at some of our resources available to you, as well as upcoming events. So first one I want to share with you, and Josh or Rodney are going to be putting this link in the chat, is we've got hands-on labs. So what you saw today, if you want to get your hands on it without building your infrastructure out or installing it in your own data center, we have hands-on labs available. We also have a hands-on lab for cloud, and then our next technology that we're going to be supporting, which is containers. There are labs out there, so you can get your hands on it, give it a test drive, see it for yourself. No infrastructure required. And then the next thing I want to also invite you to is ZertoCon is virtual for the 2nd year in a row due to obvious circumstances. You can register for free at zerto.com/ZertoCon and hear from our customers, our partners, our alliances, that are alliances with Amazon, Microsoft, Google. They'll be there sharing in some of our sessions. And then also, learn what the experience is like from customers firsthand. And that's on April 20th of this year. All right, and with that, let's turn it over to Q&A. Let's see, do we have any questions, Josh or Rodney?
We got a couple here, Gene. I think one that has come up a couple of times. Does there need to be a one-to-one live instance in AWS or Azure for each protected VM being replicated or migrated?
Absolutely not. We do not, when we replicate into Azure or AWS, so for AWS, we replicate into S3 storage. In Azure, we replicate into blob storage. And the only instance that's running there is our Zerto Cloud Appliance, which accepts the replication data and stores it in the storage there. The only time you're going to see compute requirements in EC2 or in IaaS for Azure is when you run a failover test, a live failover, or a migration. At that point, what will happen is Zerto will then take the data that's in the blob or S3 and basically move it over or copy it over to EBS for AWS or managed disk for Azure. then it'll create the VM instances out there and then power them on. So it's built to be simple and cost effective to get the data there and protect it, and then you only consume as soon as you start turning those workloads on.
Fantastic. And I think another one, this is one that you and I have discussed multiple times, but how do you sync a Zerto DR failover with DNS, either traditional or GSLB?
How do you sync it with DNS?
I just say, how do we handle DNS during a failover? Maybe that's an easier way to simplify this out.
DNS during a failure. Okay, yeah. So you're not talking about cloud specifically, right? Or is
Nope.
it anywhere?
No,
okay.
It wasn't platform specific.
Okay, so DNS wise, to update DNS records, what we do that second reboot on the re-IP, so the system can register in DNS. So there will need to be some instance of dynamic DNS, so it does recognize the new IP address of the system that's coming up and saying, hello, here I am. So yeah, it's basically integrated into the re-IP portion, so you can actually add your DNS servers in there, so that when systems come up, they can register themselves against DNS, both in the cloud and on-prem.
Yeah. And we had also talked about pre and post-process script as well, right, Gene, for initiating some DNS refreshes, kicking DNS in the butt?
Right. Yeah. So if you don't happen to have dynamic DNS, then that's just another consideration to put into your runbook. If you are re-IPing your systems, a post-recovery script can be added to the virtual protection group settings, so that after the workloads come up, that script will run, and then it will update the DNS records for you, so that when the systems boot, then they'll be good to go.
Fantastic. Is it possible to produce a report on the RTO and RPO for servers that we have involved in a DR exercise?
Yes, so everything that you run in a DR exercise, just like that report we saw in the move operation, you will get a report that automatically gets created that shows you, again, who ran the operation, what type of operation it was, DR, test, live DR, or move, timestamp chosen, RTO, and then so when you look at the point in time, it's gonna show you exactly when that was. So your RPO is typically going to be based on the point in time that you choose to recover. So if you chose, if you had a DR test and you chose a timestamp from an hour ago, then your RPO at that point is going to be an hour, because you're not using the latest checkpoint. If you use the latest checkpoint, then whatever the RPO says in the dashboard, say it said 5 seconds, that's what your RPO is going to be, is 5 seconds. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that I'm good on that one.
Awesome.
If the move operation is used for planned failovers or planned migrations, what about disasters? What do you run in Zerto for a disaster?
For a disaster, we actually run the live failover, the failover live, because the way the move operation works, it is definitely for planned disruptions or planned migrations, and that's because in order for it to execute, the source VM needs to be running, so it can shut it down and insert that last checkpoint before it turns the systems back on. But if it's a disaster event and your primary data center is down, the move operation won't be able to work, because it won't be able to reach those systems and shut them down. So at that point, you do a failover live, and then the failover live is going to give you the opportunity to choose a checkpoint, either the latest checkpoint, which if the outage was 5 seconds ago and you hit that button right away, it's 5 seconds of RPO at that point, or if you can go further back in time. So it depends on the disaster. In a case where someone deleted something or a database table got corrupt and you were able to pinpoint it happened like an hour ago, then you can actually go to 60 minutes and 3 seconds or whatever right before it happened to bring that system up. So different scenarios, but yes, if in a live disaster event, you're always going to use your live failover.
Fantastic. And I think that's it for me, Gene.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, so one more thing. even if it wasn't a question, the move operation can also be used in DR exercises, because there are customers who, we have some who do the non-disruptive test, but then we also have customers who want to basically run a live scenario, right, or a live run out of their remote or DR data center. So you can either use a live failover for that, but you're going to get crash consistent. So if you want a real world experience in your DR testing and running out of your DR data center, then use the failover live. That's going to give you the full experience of the crash consistency and everything. But there's a little bit of risk there, right? Because if the system comes up and something's wrong with it, you'd have to go back. It can get messy in that. Depends on how you do it. Yeah, there's a way to do it properly. But we have customers who want to run out of their DR data center for weeks, to make sure everything's burned in and it works right. So what they'll do is they'll use the move operation, basically effectively migrate that application to their DR data center, run out of there for 2 weeks, and then come right back. And in this instance, you're not shutting down the systems, you're not getting crash consistent disks, you're getting application consistent, you're testing your DR data center, your resources and everything. And then you're gracefully coming back at a time of your choosing, knowing that it will work 100%. But yeah, the failover live is meant to be for disaster recovery. So I wouldn't put my data in that aspect into test. I would prefer to make it a planned test versus an unplanned test. Great. Any questions? Any other questions? Anything else pop up, Josh or Rodney, that you guys want to ask?
No, I think we're good, Gene. I think we're at the top of the hour.
All right, great. We did this within time. Awesome. All right, so with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar today. And again, if you want to try it out for yourself, go check out the hands-on labs. The link should be in the chat. And then also, we hope to see you at Virtual ZertoCon on April 20th. Yeah, thanks for your time and have a great day. Josh and Rodney, thank you very much for helping me out in the chat.